aim trainers are becoming widely accepted as valuable tools for improving in-game performance. Even professional players are using aim trainers and seeking coaching from top aim trainer coaches and players.
I don't really have a lot of people I go to try and improve and get better. Cartoon happens to be one of those guys.
What if you don't have access to an elite aim coach like Ye does? What if you're not getting the in-game benefits that you're expecting to see with all that hard work in your aim trainer, where your technique is improving? How do you transfer the benefits from that into the game? It's a tricky thing, so let's get straight into how we can solve this. Simply playing aim trainers is not enough to guarantee improvements. The key benefits of aim trainers are the additional time spent aiming and the ability to isolate specific skills, both of which are hard to replicate in your main game. But without understanding your weaknesses in mouse control technique, you may very well end up practicing ineffective techniques and become frustrated with the lack of progress. So recognizing the potential of aim trainers is really just the first step. Without knowing how to approach them, you may struggle. So this is a knowledge problem. With the right knowledge, though, you can make informed decisions about how to train effectively. And that's why getting the knowledge is so important, because it gives you the tools and the right approaches to get what you want, which is to have improved performance. When I spoke to Cartoon on the podcast, he dropped a really important concept for aiming that I had never come across before the aim community. Check it out.
Adjusting all over the place, right? Really wide angles like flicks, they are really snappy and lack major confirmation, major precision. They have to make up for their mistakes constantly. I see that a lot. I really think tension management, it's for each situation, there's a ideal range of force you should do with the movements. And the more you play aim trainers, the better you get at it, right? I think one of the most valuable things that you can learn inside aim trainers is learning how to aim with lower levels of tension.
The mindset required for success in aim training also applies to improving any other skill in your main game. It's about creating insights from data, updating behaviors, and enhancing skills based on analysis. In esports, the goal is to win, which requires being consistently at an advantage. To achieve this, you need to develop skills that surpass those of your opponents. In this clutch, Bang manages to get the advantage on just about everything. His mechanics, his positioning, his timing, he's completely outread these players.
Unnoted, just playing here against time, up on top of the roll!
The challenge is to understand how to improve quickly and continuously, just like in aim trainers. I did a whole video with MetaDoc about accelerated learning. This is one small snippet about the Pareto principle, which is another way that you can kind of better understand how to get more from your time in your training.
Below Radiant or something, below Immortal, etc. The Pareto principle for me in Valorant would be mechanics, right? And then the thing is, you can keep applying the Pareto principle flowing down. So the most improvement would be in mechanics. Okay, in mechanics, then you have to divide that even further. Okay, there's right arm, left arm. I go that way, that far with mechanics. How good is your right arm, left arm? Because left arm, your
challenge is to understand how to improve quickly and continuously, just like in aim trainers. Having active focuses is a crucial tool for this. By understanding the fundamentals, you can identify areas for your improvement and set appropriate goals. Aim training is an iterative process, much like product development. In a competitive market, a product must continually improve to stay relevant. Looking at the evolution of the iPhone since 2007, Apple has released 42 different models of phone, each an iteration of the original. They took note of what didn't work in previous models and changed or developed upon them until they became standout features. We can do the same with our aim, iterating upon our own skill using what we have learned from past failures. Improvement requires analysis, which in turn requires data. Similarly, in aim training, your product is your technique. You either refine your technique, so you're doing your R&D, or you're testing its limits to measure your progress. If you hit a plateau, you analyze your performance and you identify your weaknesses. And through your understanding of the fundamentals, You then go forth and try to improve those weaknesses. Once you see the progress, you test your technique again. This is the next version of your skill. Ultimately, aim training is about self-sufficiency. To guide your progress, you must analyze the skills you aim to improve. Aim trainers are a vector for practicing critical thinking and intentionally steering your progress. If you aren't getting the results you're looking for, you aren't putting in the right inputs and need to be honest about that. Just because you put in the effort doesn't mean you're entitled to results. You only get results by doing the correct thing with the right amount of effort. This is why when asked about talent in aim training, Minigod in the podcast we did together explained it like this.
For me, talent, like what I believe talent is, like in terms of like aim training, is kind of like an ability to focus on the right things in the right time. So when I have like a talent, I'm able to kind of like focus on the right things from the start, so I don't kind of like waste my time playing some sort of like tasks that might kind of like make my improvement a bit longer. So for example, when you kind of like start aim trainers, you might maybe start playing this like very popular task like grid shot, and you will spend maybe like 100 hours playing grid shot. Well, I will spend like 100 hours playing something else because I know that grid shot might not help me the best because, you know, we have like big targets and in game you don't really have this big targets, so it doesn't really make sense to do it. So I play something else, you play something else, and then we have the same amount of hours, but I might have like way better results just because I kind of like focus on the right things. And I believe that's what talent is like in aim trainers. Like people are able to kind of like put their focus in the right things. Like a talented person kind of like knows the road from the start, or at least is able to tell the better solutions in comparison to others, which makes them kind of like, while putting the equal effort, they're able to squeeze better benefits just because they focus on the good things. That's what I believe in.
So if you're struggling to solve problems independently or to understand which direction to take, I'm a big fan of the fake it till you make it approach as a useful strategy. Observe how better players play, replicate their techniques, and analyze their effectiveness. This approach can teach you a lot about what works and what doesn't. Try to juxtapose their performance against yours and be curious about the contrast. If you notice they're really good with the initial flick speed and you're not, focus on that area. If your reactive microcorrections are bad in comparison, study that skill and that player until you see improvement. This approach is like building a house. Each brick doesn't feel like much is really happening, but eventually you have a house. Let's say you're generally good on the training front. You're watching content, you're learning, you're experimenting, you're making progress in your mouse control, and your scores are going up in the benchmarks. But you're not seeing the benefit in-game as you would expect. It's common for players to experience this and to lose interest in aim training. I mean, the entire value argument is that we're training mouse control for an in-game benefit, so the longer there is no benefit, the more likely you'll lose interest. Let me explain why this might be the case and why you need to persevere in your training. Firstly, even though you can set your FOV, your sensitivity, to be the same between your aim trainer and your main game, it's still a very different feeling because of the enemy speeds, sizes, dimensions, weapons, and the significantly higher cognitive load with all the information and decision making that is present. In this environment, it's very easy for the brain to not connect the dots between the technique you're learning in the aim trainer and the experience of aiming in similar scenarios in the game. Aiming is supposed to be second nature, so if our brains can't make a connection for when to use our updated technique, we'll fall back into old habits because so much cognitive load is going into the game decision making. So in all the chaos, the things that you want your brain to make second nature with your technique updates, it's going to be harder to do that because of all of the chaos.
Oh! Oh! What the fuck is going on? What the fuck is going on?
If you overly focus on technique management in game, performance often suffers because aiming outcomes depend on reading the game well, taking good positions, reacting quickly, and focusing on aiming being secondary. If aiming becomes a primary focus and we actively manage technique, performance will go down, leading to frustration, which is why I recently made the video about missing shots, how to recover. So check that one out if you're curious for more information on that particular subject. So what we've understood now is that we're in a tricky position. So what are the solutions? There are two main solutions that I think are key in solving this problem. Now, number one is something that most people probably already understand, which is consistency and high quality reps. So technique work takes time and perseverance. Once you find a way to execute a technique with higher quality, consistent training will help embed it into second nature. High quality reps are crucial. Lower quality reps will increase the variance in your technique. So if you're someone that likes to just grind even when your focus becomes low because you're tired and so on, just know that that's going to come with some potential downsides. That in the one sense, you'll get more reps, which can be good, but it kind of depends, because at what quality are you able to execute those reps? Now, if you're just, let's say, in a situation where your technique is fairly set, as opposed to you actively trying to change your technique, that's going to be more acceptable if your technique is already set to sort of mindlessly grind. Whereas if you're trying to sort of actively improve your technique, but you're not able to have enough focus available, you're going to have worse quality results in a return on technique gains, because we're trying to engage here in an active learning process. And it's well documented that if we're not able to apply a good amount of focus into that activity, it's less likely we're going to get a good return from it. So it really is a different answer based on which stage that you're actually in at the moment. Are you trying to actively train and fix technique, or are you in a position where you're just sort of grinding the current technique that you have and you don't have as big of a focus on technique correction? With all that said, another key here is incremental integration. And so what do I mean by that? So this is about adapting the connection between the mouse control technique that you're developing in the aim trainer and the scenarios in which it applies in game. Here I stress one skill focus at a time, because so much is happening when you get into game. So for example, if you're unhappy with your micro corrections in the game, focus on that specific skill. Notice the feeling during micro correction tasks, your tension, your flicking speed, your hand movements, clean lines, pathing while reading the map. How does it feel when you're in this task? So we're doing some sort of metacognition here, where we're becoming aware of the cognition. We're creating a state where we can notice what's going on. And when we have a feeling, the feeling is something that is conferred to us by our intuition, because we can't consciously understand. We have no way to consciously comprehend all of the electrical signals and everything else, all the math that is going into our brain understanding how to move the mouse. But what we do get is we get this feeling. So what is that feeling? So that's important to understand. Now, when you're in the game, use death matches to isolate this particular skill that you've decided to care about more. And so in the example, we use micro corrections. So focus on remembering the feeling from your micro correction training. Imagine the targets in the game are similar to those in the aim trainer. Try to achieve a similar feeling between micro-correcting in the game and in the trainer. One of the other reasons that this is actually important is because what I have found is that the aim trainer, again, despite the sends and FOV being the same as in-game, the dimensions just feel quite different. So it often is hard for my brain to make the connection just because of the visual differences alone. So if you're playing the main game, limit yourself, like I said, to focusing on one skill, just to avoid a bigger detriment to your performance. I would say it's also fine to use ranked games as training and to recognize those scenarios where you execute micro corrections. Over time, you'll develop a better connection between your aim training improvements and your in-game performance. Ultimately, as you develop improved techniques, your brain just needs to understand when to execute them and how to replace old habits that can always resurface unexpectedly. And by adopting these strategies, you can ensure that the improvements you make in aim trainers effectively translate to your in-game performance, helping you to achieve greater success. I hope that this video was helpful. If so, please check out the Patreon to support me, as well as subscribing and liking and all of that goodness. Thank you all, and I'll see you on the next one.